To save Alexander from the sea of fire, I lost my eyesight. I became blind at the wedding. He promised me with tears streaming down his face. I promised to love you forever, to be your support. But on the day I regained my sight, I found him intimately holding another woman. Next to them stood a bionic robot that looked exactly like me when I was young, quietly watching their closeness. It turned out he had been putting sleeping pills in my milk every night. Then he played happily with his little lover beside me. When he realized I could see all of this, his face suddenly turned pale. I had just regained my sight. Things were still a bit blurry, but the scene before me was exceptionally clear. In the living room, Alexander was holding the girl's waist, kissing her deeply. He looked very eager. It seems as if he wants to possess her completely. During the time I ran from the bedroom to downstairs, I imagined countless times how he would react when he learned that my vision had recovered. He would surely be very happy. I never expected things would turn out this way. I can't help but feel nauseous make a sound. It startled them. Alexander immediately stepped back. He walked quickly towards me. He embraced me. He asked me, "Emily, are you feeling unwell?" He appeared very calm. His voice was steady and gentle. It revealed deep concern in his movements. The scent of his perfume was mixed with a pungent heather fragrance. It made my already sore eyes feel even worse. "Does your eye hurt?" Alexander gently patted my back. The movement was extremely gentle, as if he were helping to relieve my pain. He gestured with his other hand. He gestured for the beautiful woman on the sofa to leave quickly. My vision hasn't fully recovered yet. I feel like my gaze must look very dull. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so arrogant, especially that woman. She openly displayed herself in front of me, the dense marks on her body. It's like I was slapped hard in the face. It clearly tells me that it was Alexander's work. My heart feels like it's being gently ground by a fine needle, leaving behind a multitude of tiny pinpricks. With just a slight movement, I felt a sharp sting. Alexander gently comforted me. "Let's go back to the room and rest." He said that without waiting for my response. He picked me up and carried me to the room. Before leaving, he didn't forget to turn back and warn that woman to leave quickly. But just as Alexander set me down on the bed, carefully tucking me in, the woman who was supposed to leave followed us instead. Alexander's breath caught for a moment. Her gaze was cold as she stared at him. The woman showed no fear. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Boldly, she kissed him. Pale moonlight spilled in through the tree shadows. I had my back to them. I pretended to be asleep, but tears kept streaming down. I couldn't help but think of the year I graduated from university, the time I risked everything to save Alexander. That day, the old house suddenly caught fire. The beams of the roof collapsed. Flames and thick smoke were everywhere. I held it in. I dragged the burning Alexander out. As a result, my eyes were blinded by the smoke. During that time, I was emotionally stirred every day. I cried and shouted endlessly. It was Alexander who held me tightly. Over and over again, he made me believe in him. He promised me in a hoarse voice, "I love you. You are the only one in my heart. Starting today, I will be your eyes. Let's get married. Okay, I will take good care of you," under his assurance. I gradually calmed down. In the 2 years after marriage, he has been taking care of me, as he said. He has always been looking after me. But since when? While he was caring about my health, he also started responding to another person's needs. I tightly grasped the blanket. The pain in my palm made me tremble incessantly. "Alexander, once my eyes. Who are you looking at now?" The next day when I woke up, Alexander and the other person had already left. Only I and the bionic robot customized for me remained at home. He was particularly gentle at that time. He said to me, "Emily, when I'm not at home, it will take good care of you for me." His thoughtfulness and care brought me to tears. However, when I saw the appearance of the bionic robot, I was completely stunned. It looked exactly like me during my university days. I groped the robot. I accidentally touched a certain spot. Suddenly, a video popped up. The moment I saw the content, I froze completely. I was dumbfounded. A wave of discomfort and sadness rushed over me. All kinds of complex emotions surged like a tide. My hands were shaking violently. I flipped through those videos. I found they were all recordings of Alexander and Victoria together. Every time they were intimate, that robot was actually recording them on the side. I felt a wave of nausea. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stumbled to the bathroom and started to vomit. Her mind was filled with the words Alexander said to her in the video. She gently asked Alexander, "Alexander, Who do you think is better, me or your Emily? Who fascinates you more? Alexander chuckled lightly, but his hands did not stop moving. Victoria, you can't even compare to Emily. He gripped the woman's chin tightly, so tightly that her skin turned red. I can't bear to use these methods on her, leaving so many marks. My Emily is like the bright moon in the sky. She is like a clean, fragile, and pure princess. I can't even bear to press on her waist. Victoria's beautiful face showed a hint of distortion. Then she sneered. But deep down, you actually want to pull her down from her pedestal. Don't you? You wish she could be like me, obedient to you. Alexander paused. Then he continued. Otherwise, how could you let this robot, who looks exactly like her, stay by our side every time? Victoria's eyes were fixed on the hidden camera of the robot, as if it were provoking me through the lens. Her gaze was filled with sarcasm. It seems to mock my naivety. I actually thought Alexander would love me forever. Suddenly, the door opened with a click. Emily, his voice overlapped with the one in the video. It made me feel particularly uncomfortable. I couldn't help but vomit again. Alexander pushed open the bathroom door. He immediately squatted down beside me. His face was full of tension. Emily, are you okay? Where do you feel uncomfortable? I glanced at him. I saw worry in Alexander's eyes. That kind of worry was particularly intense. It was as if he loved me to the point of being unable to extricate himself. I shook my head. I pushed him away. I walked to the sink and washed up a bit. Then I slowly said, "It's fine. It's just that my stomach feels a bit uncomfortable." He looked at me seriously. He said, "If you feel uncomfortable, just say it. I will take you to the hospital immediately." Then, he added, "For me, your health is more important than anything else. Understand?" I didn't say anything, but my body felt a bit tense. The screen showing the robot's footage was still on. Alexander didn't notice my abnormality. He just gently kissed my forehead. "Speak. You should rest first. I have something to take care of." After saying that, he hurried into the study. When passing by the robot, he didn't look at it at all. I breathed a sigh of relief. I gently turned off the robot's screen. I had just finished tidying up when Alexander called out to me. "Emily, I have a surprise for you." He handed me a document. He said softly, "I specially opened a studio for you. I want your designs to be seen by everyone again." Alexander said sincerely, "I don't want your efforts to go to waste, so I need you to sign your consent. Let them start making the finished product." His words made my heart race. Before the incident, I just won an international award. He is a highly regarded designer. But after losing my eyesight, I could no longer pursue design. If before the matter between him and Victoria is exposed by me, what he said could move me to tears. But now, I received it expressionlessly. I specifically felt it with my hand. There was actually no braille on it. I looked down at the document. I found it was an agreement to unconditionally transfer the design drafts to Victoria. As long as I sign it, Victoria can dispose of these design drafts as she wishes. Whether she publishes them under her name or resells them, I have no right to question it. I was stunned. Holding the document in my hand, my fingers trembled uncontrollably. He really likes Victoria like this. To help her get through smoothly, he didn't even prepare braille. So anxious. Suddenly, Alexander's phone vibrated. Because I can't see with my eyes, he didn't avoid me when checking the messages. I clearly saw Victoria sending a message asking him, "Will Emily sign?" Alexander's fingers moved quickly across the screen. The words he typed were as sharp as a knife. He comforted me. "Don't worry. I will handle everything well. You just need to wait calmly to be your designer." My mind went blank. My whole body suddenly felt cold. I couldn't help but shiver. Teardrops streamed down uncontrollably. Big drops fell onto the documents, making a crisp sound. Alexander was taken aback. Quickly put away his phone, he asked anxiously, "Emily, why are you crying?" He gently helped me wipe away my tears. The motion was as gentle as if handling a precious, fragile item. But just a moment ago, this hand was still assuring Victoria that it would give her a satisfactory answer. My heart feels like it's being torn apart. The pain is unbearable. After a long while, I finally managed to speak. I said hoarsely, "I'm just too moved." Alexander laughed after hearing this. He held me in his arms. He said gently, "Fool, you are the person I love the most. It's my duty to treat you well. It's my responsibility. The person I love the most." I smiled bitterly. In the end, I signed my name. Alexander obviously breathed a sigh of relief. He happily held me. He said, "Emily, once the studio is set up, I will take you to visit it right away. Then," he added, "I'm going to submit the documents now. You wait for me here to come back." After saying that, he left with the documents after the door closed. I finally had the time to properly look at our home. As I looked up, I noticed that there are quite a few women's items at home. There are lingerie casually placed on the sofa. Cosmetics are scattered on the table. On the balcony, there are clothes drying that aren't mine. A thought suddenly popped into my mind. I trembled all over. I slowly walked towards another room. I stood at the door. My heart raced. My breathing became rapid. I took a deep breath. I gathered my courage and grasped the doorknob. I slowly pushed the door open. I walked in to take a look. The room had been arranged as Alexander and Victoria's new home. There were wedding photos of them hanging on the wall by the bed. The wardrobe was filled with various sexy outfits. In addition, there were many special props. Seeing these, my breathing became rapid. I felt like all the blood in my body had frozen. I could completely imagine. During countless nights while I was asleep, Alexander would come to this room with Victoria. There's only a wall between us. My husband is intimately with another woman. I feel completely weak. I'm almost about to fall to the ground. My tears keep flowing uncontrollably. Alexander, what do these 9 years mean to us after a long while? I slowly stood up, holding onto the floor. I stumbled into the study. I backed up all the drafts I designed. I also saved a copy of the videos from the robot. Every time I finish something, my heart aches faintly. After it was over, I noticed a photo of Victoria on Alexander's desk. That photo was next to a picture of him and me. I stared at it intently. The cold wind violently hit the window, making a loud noise. I seemed to sense Alexander's hidden satisfaction from that sound. After all, whether it's a wife or a mistress, he takes care of everything meticulously. My heart, which had finally calmed down, became restless again. I took a deep breath. I pushed open the window. The wind flipped a few pages of the books beside me. Those pages were filled with writing. I picked one up to take a look. My eyes narrowed sharply. Every line contained harsh words deliberately written by Victoria. The lines were filled with provocation. "A blind person is fit to compete with me. If I curse at you, you won't even see it. How pathetic." Today, Alexander insisted on pulling me to kiss in front of Emily. Although she is the nominal wife, she is actually just a part of our relationship. You can't see it. Your husband belongs to me. Your home is also mine. Even your works belong to me. What do you have that can compare to me? The book fell to the ground with a thud. My hands trembled uncontrollably. That feeling of disgust and anger mixed together. It felt like a large net had trapped me. It's making it hard for me to breathe. My eyes, head, and hands are all hurting. It seems like the tears have dried up. Everything in front of me has become blurry. I can't remember how I picked up the books from the floor. I understand. My relationship with Alexander can never go back to how it was. Night falls. Alexander pushed open the door. He smelled of alcohol. The lipstick mark on his collar was very obvious, but he didn't care at all. He walked into the room and hugged me tightly. He asked, "Emily, did you miss me? I brought you some cupcakes. They're already in the fridge. Don't forget to eat them tomorrow. I saw a necklace while shopping today. I think it would suit you perfectly. It'll be delivered to your house in a couple of days." He kept talking. Every word was filled with straightforward affection. I'm glad I saved him back then, and I'm grateful he's always been by my side. Keep your promises. Now I realize how ridiculously wrong I was. I forced a smile. Speak, go to sleep. It's already very late. Alexander is a bit drunk. He obediently nodded. He quickly fell asleep after changing into his pajamas by the light of the moon. I opened his phone. I found out that Victoria was actually his secretary. At a banquet, Victoria took the initiative to block drinks for him. Although she was already feeling a bit unwell, she insisted on taking him home. Seeing her like this, Alexander couldn't help but feel a softness in his heart. Later, they got together. He simply brought Victoria home to live with them. The bionic robot is just a precaution. If Victoria accidentally makes a sound, Alexander can still find a reason to fool me. As for the most important reason, Alexander said in the chat box, "I always remember her from our school days. Back then, she was smart and outstanding, always so eye-catching. It's different from now. I can't see it now." A wave of bitterness in my throat. I suppress the turmoil inside me. Continue reading. I realize they seek thrills. Sometimes they put sleeping pills in the milk I drink every night. After I fall asleep, they are in the room with me and Alexander, intimately interacting beside me. I felt disgusted and nearly threw up, but I was afraid of waking Alexander. I held back and didn't make a sound. but the tears kept streaming down. I gritted my teeth, slowly slid to the bottom. I noticed that tomorrow is Victoria's birthday. She has been whining about wanting to celebrate at home. I wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. An idea gradually formed in my mind. On Victoria's birthday, Alexander left early under the pretext of company business. He left the house ahead of time. I looked it up online. I found out that Victoria released my previous designs under her name. These designs have been publicly sold. The price is not low. Alexander is also promoting her with his official account. He calls her a genius designer. They publicly announced their intention to hire her as an exclusive designer. As soon as this news was released, it immediately trended online. Netizens and celebrities in the fashion industry praised her designs for being very creative. I looked at those messages. I just scoffed. I hope she likes the birthday gift I sent her tonight. It's late at night. The moonlight fills the ground. Alexander and Victoria returned home together. He softly asked, "Emily, how do you feel today?" As he spoke, he opened the fridge. He took out the milk. "Pretty good." I smiled, but my gaze was hollow as I stared at them. Victoria gently kissed him on the corner of his mouth. Then she walked into the room. Alexander skillfully added sleeping pills to the cup. "That's good. Drink the milk and then go to sleep." "Okay." Before I could say anything, Victoria walked out of the room. She was wearing an eye-catching bunny outfit. Alexander glanced over. His gaze instantly became profound. His throat moved. Desire was evident in his eyes. It was the most familiar feeling before my blindness. Alexander handed over the milk. His voice was a bit hoarse. "Have some milk, Emily." I took the milk. I said calmly, "I want to go back to my room to drink." Alexander carefully led me into the room. I said again. I left my blanket in the living room. "Can you help me get it?" Alexander gently stroked my hair. He said with a smile, "You little scatterbrain. I'll go get it for you. You have to obediently drink the milk." I nodded. Once he walked far away, I immediately ran to the bathroom. I poured out the milk. Alexander saw the empty cup. He raised an eyebrow. He gently helped me onto the bed. Then he covered me with the blanket and a small throw. I said, "I have to take care of some work. You should sleep first." "Okay," she replied. "All right." After a while, some uncomfortable sounds came from the next room. After I took the sleeping pills, I couldn't hear them anymore. I kept my eyes closed. My eyes felt dry and painful. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the door opening. Those two actually walked outside the door. Alexander softly called out to me a few times. Seeing that I didn't respond, he bravely brought Victoria into the room, and they started to get affectionate in front of the large dressing mirror in the bedroom. Alexander is holding her and kissing her, and above the mirror hangs our wedding photo. Victoria gently bites his ear. She asks, "In front of your beloved wife, doing this with me. Don't you think it's special?" My fingers are tightly clenched into fists. I slowly open my eyes in the dark. I just catch a glimpse of a smug expression on Alexander's face. He coldly commands, "Don't speak." The kiss that falls on her lips, both intense and eager, endlessly intertwined, difficult to part. Victoria's gaze is dazed. She softly says, "But I find it so thrilling." "Brother," I look at Alexander and can't help but think, since we met until now, he has always cared about his image. Because he once said, "Especially in front of me." He always makes sure to present himself neatly, to appear before me in his best form, even when he is doing something disgraceful now. He still dresses impeccably. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I said it casually. "Really, I also find it quite thrilling." Alexander's hand trembled slightly. He suddenly turned his head. His face instantly turned pale. "Emily, you." He seemed as if he had just woken from a dream. He quickly pushed Victoria away. Victoria didn't pay attention to her feet. She suddenly fell down. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Alexander." But Alexander didn't even look at her. He walked straight ahead. When he reached in front of me, he suddenly stopped. It seemed he realized his situation was a bit awkward. He stood there in a daze. "Emily, when did I sneer coldly at you?" It interrupted his speech. The room was filled with an unpleasant odor. This vulgar scene made me feel suffocated. I immediately stood up. I left without looking back. "Emily, don't go." Alexander wanted to come forward and stop me, but I slammed the door shut, blocking him outside. As I was leaving, it started to rain. The fine spring rain hit my face. It was both cold and painful. The cold surged up from deep within my heart. I suddenly felt weak all over. I squatted by the roadside, crying uncontrollably. It's been way too long. We've been together for a long time, long enough that he feels like an innate part of my life. When I was in trouble, he was always by my side. He solemnly promised me that he would always treat me well. He once promised to take care of me for a lifetime, be my eyes forever. Time passes. He still says he loves me. Yet he is with someone else. I hear footsteps behind me, so I turn around. Alexander has already tidied up his clothes. He is holding an umbrella in his hand. He quietly says to me, "Emily, you are weak. Don't get caught in the rain. Come back with me. Let's sit down and talk properly." As he said this, he came over to pull me. I suddenly shook off his hand. I asked him, losing control of my emotions. Why do this?" Alexander's voice sounded a bit hoarse. He showed a pained expression on his face. He said, "Emily, you have to believe me. I still love you, and I only love you. You can see it. I am really happy. Happier than anyone. I am bending over. I'm trembling from the pain. I couldn't help but raise my voice. My tone was somewhat sharp. Don't you find this funny?" I tried to force a smile, but the tears kept flowing uncontrollably. The rain and tears mixed together, forming a puddle on the ground, reflecting my disheveled face. "Don't even talk about trusting you. Right now, even looking at you makes me feel sick." A hint of sadness flashed in his eyes. "That's not how it is. Emily, there are reasons for all of this," I stammered. "It's just that it's just," she pressed for more. "Just what?" I wiped my tears and said with a cold smile, "You can't say it, can you?" His face was pale. Even his lips had no color. The umbrella fell to the ground during the earlier struggle. Alexander's hair was wet and stuck to his forehead. I said, "Let's get a divorce." Alexander's eyes suddenly narrowed, as if he hadn't heard clearly. He asked in surprise, "What?" I stared at him coldly. I said slowly, "Alexander, let's get a divorce. I can't be with you anymore." After saying that, I turned around and left. With my back to him, I reminded him, "Don't follow me." His footsteps paused slightly. All I heard was a short, sad sound from his throat. After leaving home, I booked a hotel and quickly contacted a lawyer to draft the divorce agreement. When the lawyer arrived, Alexander didn't open the door, nor was he willing to sign. That night, I received a text message from him, "Stop messing around." I stared at those 3 words. A wave of anger and sadness surged in my heart. I knew the reason he sent this message. He thinks I can't live without him, not just because he knows how much I love him, but also because I've been blind for these years. Everything in my life depends on him. He thinks I can't live without him. I hold my phone tightly. My fingers turn pale from the pressure. My eyes feel sore and dry. But I can't cry anymore. I open the window. I look up at the sky. All I see is a blur. I murmur softly to myself, "Alexander, I will never look back." Alexander did not respond, and he still hasn't signed the agreement. I can only take the documents home. He sits in the living room. He hears the sound, suddenly turns to look over. When our eyes meet, a hint of surprise flashes in Alexander's eyes. He immediately hugs me tightly. He says in a somewhat deep voice, "You finally came back." His voice sounds hoarse, as if he hasn't slept well for several days. The beard on my chin has also grown out. I know I was wrong. I won't make the same mistake again. Let's not talk about divorce. Okay. His body temperature gave me goosebumps instantly. A wave of nausea surged up like the sea. I almost couldn't hold back from throwing up. I struggled hard for a moment. Finally, I pushed him away. I said coldly, "Alexander, sign it." Alexander's expression suddenly became stiff. He immediately looked both angry and anxious. "Are you done causing a scene? I've already apologized. What else do you want me to do?" An absurd feeling surged up from my heart. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The suppressed anger and grievance erupted at that moment. I couldn't help but slap him hard, with a loud smack. My hand hurt as if it were on fire. I was extremely angry. He said loudly, "You apologized. I have to accept it. I will do as I please." I sneered a little. "Speak. I've made myself very clear. I just want to divorce you." He was startled by my appearance. He didn't care about the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. He hurried forward, trying to support my shoulder, but I dodged him. "Don't touch me. I feel uncomfortable." Alexander's body suddenly trembled. His eyes instantly turned red. His eyes were filled with surprise and sadness. "Can you stop talking to me like that?" he said in a pleading tone. "Emily, do you not want me anymore?" My tears fell suddenly, because he had said the exact same thing when I had just gone blind. I had a terrible temper. I would erupt in anger at the slightest thing. I was filled with negative emotions. Sometimes I hear others discussing behind my back. They say Alexander is impressive. He became a rising star in the industry right after graduation. And what about me? I'm just an invisible person. I'm not worthy of him at all. When these words reach my ears, my mood instantly becomes terrible. In the end, I gave up. I broke up with Alexander. At that time, he cried until his eyes were red. He asked me, "Emily, do you not want me anymore?" My heart was suddenly hit by a sharp pain. I remained silent for a while. Then I slowly said in a nearly hoarse voice, "I hope we can part ways amicably. After all, we have been together for so many years. I also don't want to take this to court." After saying that, I put the recorded video I had saved in front of him, and that agreement he tricked me into signing. Alexander looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He almost couldn't stand up. I just smiled. I said it casually. When I signed that agreement, I understood. From that moment on, we could never go back to the way things were. Every time I spoke, his face grew even paler. Tears streamed down his face, like pearls scattered from a broken string. He covered his face with his hands. He asked me, "Is there really no way to turn back?" I thought seeing him cry would make me feel sad, but my heart felt numb. I had no feelings at all. "It was you who turned away first. Clearly, it was you." After a while, he bent down and signed his name on the agreement. "Emily, I took the document, I opened the door, and took one last look at him. It was over between us." The door closed, but his sobs still echoed out. It sounded very sad. I just got the divorce certificate with Alexander from the Civil Affairs Bureau. The weight that had been on my heart for so long has finally been lifted. From now on, he and I will have no more relationship. I was about to leave. Alexander called out to me. It's only been a few days since we last met. He looked noticeably thinner. There were obvious dark circles under his eyes. He looked particularly haggard. He was completely different from his previous noble and aloof demeanor. He forced a smile. He said with difficulty, "Emily, I still don't want to give up. Even though we are divorced, I still want to pursue you again, no matter what the cost." I was just about to speak when I heard a sharp female voice shout, "Alexander, what do you mean by this?" Victoria's fingers were tightly clenched. Her eyes were reddened. Her face was filled with anger. "What am I to you then? You promised before. I'll always take care of you. How can you go back on your word?" Hearing this made me. I couldn't help but laugh. Victoria is too naive. Promises only matter when both sides truly love each other. If Alexander truly valued promises, he wouldn't betray. Victoria wouldn't appear in his life. Victoria is emotionally agitated. She questions him in a hoarse voice. Her hair is messily sticking to her face. "You tell me, what am I supposed to do? What do you take me for?" Alexander rubbed his temples. He seemed a bit impatient. He took a deep breath and said, "Victoria, stop clinging to me. I won't be with you. I only have Emily in my heart." His tone was cold. There was not a hint of emotion. Victoria stared at him intently, then suddenly smiled. "Alexander, I'm pregnant." Alexander's face suddenly turned pale. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. He just looked at me in despair. I lowered my head. I smiled faintly. "Alexander," his throat moved. He responded softly. I said calmly, "You really are a bit dirty." Alexander was taken aback. Before he could collect himself, I continued, "I hope you don't show up in front of me again. Every time I see you, I feel particularly uncomfortable." After saying that, I turned and walked away. I could clearly hear. Victoria linked arms with Alexander. She sneered a few times and said, "I already told you. She isn't worth your love at all. You see, in the end, the one who loves you the most is still me." After that day, Alexander never appeared again. I'm also busy preparing materials. I often run to the courthouse. I'm going to sue Victoria. I want to get back all of my designs. It wasn't long before Victoria lost the case. She not only has to return my design drawings, but she also has to pay me a large sum of money. Upon hearing the verdict, her face immediately turned pale. After the trial ended, Victoria angrily found me. She yelled loudly, "Emily, do you have any conscience left? Those design drawings were given to me by Alexander. Why should I pay you? Why?" Her voice suddenly rose. She was very emotional. It looked like she was about to rush over to do something, just as she was about to touch me. Alexander quickly grabbed her. He asked, "What are you doing?" Alexander furrowed his brow. He pulled hard. Victoria almost fell. He said coldly, "I don't even dare to see her. What gives you the right to disturb Emily?" Victoria's tears keep flowing uncontrollably. Her voice became hoarse with anger. "Alexander, you once treated me like a treasure. Now that you've used me up, you won't take responsibility. Why should I be the one to compensate for that money? You two are going too far. You will face consequences, especially you. Emily, you will definitely go blind again in the future. Blind person. It's always been the pain in my heart. I stood there in a daze, feeling somewhat at a loss. Alexander suddenly kicked her to the ground. Emily cannot see. It's because she saved me that this happened. How can you say that about her? With a loud bang, Victoria fell heavily to the ground. Blood flowed from between her legs, staining the ground red. She cried out in pain. Alexander, help me get up. My child. Alexander's hand was tightly clenched into a fist. He did not go to help her. Instead, he looked at me with a desperate gaze. That expression seemed to say, he is very sad, because I caught him at his most vulnerable moment. Victoria called out again. Only then did Alexander come to his senses. He said hoarsely, Emily, I will take her to the hospital first. He avoided my gaze. He took Victoria to the hospital. Later, Alexander told me, Victoria had a miscarriage, and she planned to sue him for intentional harm. Victoria stated, a settlement is fine too, but Alexander had to pay me and also compensate Emily. He also had to give me a large sum of money. Alexander scoffed. I won't compensate her. What she did to you. No punishment is enough. I remained silent. He gently sipped a cup of hot tea, then he asked, so, you came to find me just to say this? He unconsciously touched the wedding ring on his hand. His throat moved. Speak. Emily, come back to my hometown with me. I just want to go back and take a look. As long as you agree. I promise I won't bother you again in the future. I thought for a while. In the end, I agreed. As usual, Alexander, drive me home. On the way, he kept talking about the past. It seemed he wanted to win me back through memories. He said, I still remember that year, when we watched the fireworks together. When I confessed to you, I was so nervous that I couldn't speak smoothly. He continued talking, and that year, he talked for a long time, occasionally glancing at me. But I remained silent the whole time. He didn't respond to him either. The car came to a steady stop. Alexander's face turned pale. I opened the car door and got out. He walked alongside me. The appearance of that small town in my memory has changed significantly. The old houses have all been renovated. Many new shopping malls have also been built. The old house where we used to live was burned down back then. Now it has become a wasteland. Only the old locust tree at the entrance is still there. A gentle breeze blew by. A scent of locust flowers wafted to my nose. I suddenly thought of something. I said to Alexander, help me find a shovel. Seeing me talk to him, he couldn't help but laugh. He immediately agreed. Then, we dug up something buried under the old locust tree together. It was a rusty iron box. After opening it, there are 2 notes inside. On the first note is my crooked handwriting from when I was a child. The words on the paper are particularly sincere and direct. Alexander and Emily will be together forever. Alexander's body trembled slightly. He lowered his head. He opened the second note. The note only had 1 sentence written on it. Of course, they should be together forever. But Emily, if in the future Alexander does something to hurt you, don't forgive him easily. You deserve the best happiness. I took the note, gently touching the words on it. My tears couldn't stop falling. I didn't want to dampen the note, so I wiped my eyes with my muddy hands. The sadness in my heart slowly surged up. It has been 9 whole years. We have worked hard for so long. Finally, we have entered the married life we dreamed of in our youth. However, the lifetime promise we made at the beginning, now it seems so laughable. We haven't even reached 2/3 of the way, and everything is over. Alexander squats beside me. His eyes are red. He whispers, Emily, didn't we say we would be together forever? We had already discussed it. I shake my head and smile as I say. 18-year-old Alexander also said, to not let me forgive you, Alexander, you have wronged me, and you have also treated yourself poorly. Alexander stares at the 2 notes. Suddenly, he can't help but cry out loud. He keeps apologizing. His eyes are filled with genuine remorse. But since you know you were wrong, why did you do that in the first place? I wipe my tears and slowly stand up. I look down at him, Alexander. It's time for me to leave. Let's not meet again in this lifetime. Alexander knelt on the ground. He tightly grasped the hem of my clothes. His whole body was trembling violently. The hem of my clothes trembled along with him. He said with a trembling voice, no, Emily, please don't do this. I'm begging you. I will change, I promise. I can give you all my possessions and everything. I really can't live without you. I shook off his hand. I said coldly, then just leave. I turned and left. The last trace of feeling in my heart seemed to dissipate as well. I returned home. I started packing my bags. I left the country directly. I traveled alone to many places. I saw countless beautiful sceneries about Alexander. I gradually stopped thinking about it, slowly. I also can't remember why I fell in love with him in the first place. I was on a boat in Venice. Once again, I heard news about him. Alexander was punished for not agreeing to Victoria's request. Victoria was furious. She stabbed him 15 times with a dagger. He died on the spot. Victoria was later sentenced to death. A gentle breeze blew. The river's surface rippled. My reflection appeared in the clear water. That expression was calm. There was not a trace of disturbance. The boat moved slowly forward. This time, I want to see every corner of this world with my own eyes.